before we begin. Close your eyes, just for a moment. Tell me quietly, where are you listening from tonight? Is it midnight where you are? Or has the sun just slipped behind the trees? Is the room still warm? Or has the air already turned to ash? Now, look at the clock nearest you. Is it moving? Or has it paused just slightly, as if it remembers something you've forgotten? This story begins in the silence between seconds, where time stopped and never quite started again. The fire took 5 minutes, but not everything it touched burned. I am the one who guards stories that were meant to burn, but didn't. I keep the echoes that cling to smoke-blackened glass, the grief sealed inside warped metal and warped memory. In this quiet archive, there is one item I've never been able to catalog properly. A clock, warped by flame, yet still holding the shape of its final hour. Its glass is gone. Its hands are fused. Its face is blistered, but not unreadable. You'd think it would smell like soot or oil, but it doesn't. It smells like dust on old toys, and something sweeter beneath. Like plastic left too long in sunlight, like a child's breath caught in metal. I found it in a box labeled only Sodder, December. No year, no details, just that. It should have been discarded. But I kept it. Notice what I didn't do. I didn't rewind it. Didn't try to clean the face. Didn't ask how it ended up here. Because I already knew. If you've ever held something you weren't meant to keep, you understand. The hands are frozen at 1:27. But every time I look, it feels later. I remember the first time I touched it, the warmth it shouldn't have had, the texture of glass that wasn't there, the way it almost hummed. It had been wrapped in what looked like a scorched map of Fayetteville, creased over and over again until the paper nearly crumbled. They said the house stood there once, but even that was debated. Some said the house was buried in salt, others that it had never stood at all. But that clock survived. And that's what made everything harder, because time shouldn't survive a fire that swallows children whole. And yet, the clock began to change. Not visibly, but I could feel it. The hands felt heavier every week. The back plate started to blacken. A faint imprint began to appear near the base, like the shape of something once pressed against it, a child's hand, or something smaller. I set it beside another object from the same box. A soot-covered toy, half melted. It's hard to tell what it once was. A bear, a dog. It has the expression of something that tried to remember and failed. I call the ritual the ashen wake-keeping. It's what I do when I sit with both objects and listen. Not for sound, but for silence that's too complete. You see, there are rooms in this archive where nothing echoes. And there are names in this case that history refuses to speak aloud. That's why I'm telling you now, because if no one listens tonight, if the melted clock ticks again and no one hears it, the memory might slip even further. It's not just the clock. It's how it rests beside the toy, as if they belong together, as if they've always waited for someone to notice. I wonder, If you've ever seen time hesitate, not stop but shiver, then you know the feeling that haunted this family long after the fire. Long after the walls were rebuilt. I shouldn't be the one telling you this, but I am, because I kept the clock, because I couldn't let it vanish too, and because there's something it still remembers. We'll begin with the house. But you should know, by the end of this, you may start seeing 1:27 on your clocks too. If you've ever walked through a room that should feel warm but doesn't, you'll understand what happened next. The box was supposed to hold only the clock, but beneath the melted rim, tucked beneath burnt linen and soot, was something heavier, a charred, half-melted toy, the kind that no longer carries a name. Its features smoothed by heat, its fur fused with ash. It made no sound when I lifted it, but the silence around it grew deeper. I should have stopped there, catalogued it, closed the lid. But I didn't, because there was something else tucked inside the folds of scorched fabric. Not an object, but a shape, an outline, as if a child had once held this toy and never let go. I remember how cold the fabric felt. Not just chilled, but wrong, like something that had never been meant to survive past a single night. Notice how it doesn't fall apart, even when it should. The room I was working in had no windows, just stone walls, flickering lamplight, and a draft that whispered when I wasn't listening. I laid the toy beside the clock. The two of them, melted time and forgotten comfort, looked like they belonged together, as if one remembered the hour, and the other remembered who was lost inside it. And then, something odd. The toy's surface, once blackened and ridged, began to soften, not melt, but soften, almost as if the soot was lifting. I rubbed my fingers across it, and for a second, the smell of burning cloth returned. Fresh, not archival, not old. It smelled like a fire still burning. From decades ago, a flame that didn't know how to stop. There's a belief recorded in a Fayette County journal from 1946. If an object blackens in fire but does not curl, it carries the breath of what was taken. They called it the keeping burn, a burn that doesn't consume, just holds. I don't know if that's true, but I wrote it down anyway. Because the toy was warm. My hand lingered longer than it should have. There's something about grief that sticks to soft things. I remember how the seams, nearly erased, seemed to shift. Like the shape of the toy changed depending on who looked. A bear, a lamb, a child's glove folded tight. She doesn't answer right away. That silence, it changes everything. I found a fragment tucked beneath the toy. A burnt photograph corner. Faint pencil marks on the back. Maurice. The name was almost gone, but not quite. And when I lifted the toy again, the clock's hands had moved. Just barely. From 1:27 to 1:28. But the clock hadn't been wound. Not once. I stared at it, and for a moment, I forgot I was supposed to be recording anything. I forgot I was the archivist. I was just someone, touching the aftermath of a question no one wanted answered. If you've ever picked up something and felt someone else's grief come with it, then you know how I felt that night. They used to call it the Ashen Wakekeeping, a vigil not for the living, but for the items they left behind. It wasn't about death. It was about what remained too quiet. The toy was part of that silence. And now, so was I. I left the room for air, or to stop shaking, or maybe to let the past settle again. But before I did, I placed both the toy and the clock inside the old display box. They weren't meant to be separated. I don't think they ever had been. And in the dark, with the lamp still humming, I swear I heard something shuffle. Just behind me, not footsteps, but something soft. Like fabric or ash falling upward. Maybe it was nothing, but I didn't look back. You might think it was just a toy, just a melted clock, just things left behind after grief had its way with a family. But some items, they don't stay behind, they follow. The third night I sat with the archive open, I made a mistake. I brought the clock and the toy home, not to steal them. I told myself it was preservation, or documentation, or maybe I just wanted to understand something I couldn't name. If you've ever taken something out of its place, out of the stillness it belonged to, then you know what followed. At home, the toy looked smaller. Its soot seemed to have settled deeper, as if trying to hide something. The clock no longer rested. It watched. I placed both on my writing desk, and that's when I noticed it. A second shift. The toy wasn't just blackened. Its back had split, ever so slightly, revealing stuffing inside that was not the right color. It wasn't white, it was pale blue, like a uniform, like a child's winter pajamas. I touched the seam, gently, and I swear there was warmth, a kind of residual heat, like the ghost of a fire that still wanted something. And then the scent returned, not smoke, but soap, like something recently washed, as if the fire hadn't destroyed this piece of cloth, just moved it into hiding. I opened my notes from earlier, scrolled through the old family statements, the witness contradictions, the official silence. There were 5 children who vanished in the fire. But not all 5 bodies were found. In fact, none were. And buried within an unsent letter from 1947, found among Mrs. Sodder's things decades later, was a single line that never made it into any official report. I still hear footsteps near the attic, but the door won't open anymore. No one had mentioned an attic in the diagrams. No fire reports referenced it, but Mrs. Sodder's note did. And it was dated nearly 2 years after the fire. Handwritten, unmailed, tucked into a Bible. They said she wandered the halls at night, touching the walls, smoothing the plaster with her hands, as if hoping to feel someone press back. The toy had started to change again. Where the fur had burned away, new fabric seemed to emerge. Paler, more intact, almost stitched with intention. I don't know if it was always like that, but it didn't look like that the night before. She lights the candle, but never looks at it. That's what changed, I think. I lifted the clock from the desk. Its hands had moved again, not forward, backward, from 128 to 126. I tried to breathe steadily. I told myself maybe I hadn't remembered the time correctly. Maybe it had always said that. But something in me didn't believe it. I reached for the toy. As I turned it in my hands, a soft line of soot traced itself across my palm. Not random, not smudged. A shape, 5 lines, like fingers, like a handprint. And for the first time since I began this archive, I asked myself aloud, would you have opened it? The attic door, the burnt toy, the truth that had been waiting just behind the soot. Would you? There's a saying in West Virginia mountain law. If a child is taken by fire but leaves no ashes, they've been kept, not claimed. Kept in memory, kept in silence, kept in something soft and blackened that never fully gives them back. I replaced the toy in its box, but the shape of it had changed. It now sat upright, even though I hadn't propped it. The clock wouldn't go back in, not fully. Its shape no longer matched the outline it had left behind, and I couldn't tell anyone. Because what do you say when a melted object starts to remember more than you do? There's a kind of silence that doesn't come from stillness, but from listening too closely. If you've ever held something long enough that it begins to feel like part of you, you know that change doesn't happen all at once. It was the 4th night. I hadn't meant to return the objects to the archive, but I hadn't meant to keep them either. They sat on my desk again. Not arranged, just waiting. The clock no longer marked hours. Its face was dull, its hands barely visible now beneath a thin film of soot that hadn't been there yesterday. But what stopped me was the toy. It had opened, not torn, not broken, opened. Inside the seam where the burn had split and softened, something small had fallen out. At first, I thought it was thread, but when I looked closer, it was paper, folded. Twice, I reached for it, hands trembling in the hush. The paper was brittle, edges curled inward like it had been hiding too long. It bore no signature, no date, just a child's drawing, done in blue crayon. 5 small figures standing near something that looked like a house. Except the house wasn't whole. It was scorched on one side, and the 5th figure, farthest from the others, was drawn upside down. She closes the drawer with both hands this time. That's when I knew. She was done searching. I traced the paper with my fingertip. It was real. It smelled like smoke and wax. And beneath it, inside the toy's body, was something else. A button, melted halfway, still attached to a loose thread of cloth. Blue flannel, same as the pajamas. Noted in one of the missing children's records. Maurice, age 14. Last seen wearing light blue. But that didn't make sense. The toy had never been opened. It had been sealed with museum wire. I'd photographed it, logged it. I would have seen this. Unless the toy wasn't revealing itself to be catalogued. Only remembered. Not documented. Not preserved. Just remembered. The air changed. It wasn't cold, but something about it felt thinner, as if the room had been holding its breath. For years, I turned the clock toward me again. Its glass was now fully gone, cracked at the corners, slid away like ice left too long in the sun. The hands had stopped moving altogether, and in their place, a faint indentation where the soot had settled in the shape of 5 small marks, not numbers, fingers, like someone had reached from inside it and tried to turn back time. There's an old belief buried in the Sodder case archives, a letter, unsigned, dated January 1949 from someone claiming to be a neighbor. The last line simply read, "No fire takes without giving back a trace. If you find the trace, you'll know who stayed." Folklorists later called it a keeping thread. The idea that one item would always carry the truth, but only if remembered properly. Not analyzed, not cut apart, just kept close. Like a child's toy, like a mother's letter, like a melted clock too stubborn to let go. I held the toy in both hands. No gloves, no preservation tape. I held it the way a child might hold something that hurt, but still meant safety. The button in its side pressed softly into my palm. The drawing slipped between my fingers. The smell of burnt fabric had become something else. Familiar. Private. I didn't cry, but I felt the weight of someone who should have. It's not what she keeps. It's what she keeps hidden. I closed the file. I turned off the light, and for the first time since I began keeping the Sodder records, I left the toy and the clock exactly where they were. Unlocked, unlabeled, unexplained. Not because I gave up, but because they no longer needed me. To tell their story, they had already begun to tell each other. The clock wouldn't run again. The toy wouldn't close again. But something had passed between them, and I think, whatever passed, was waiting to be remembered. Some stories belong to a house. Others belong to the silence that surrounds it. If you've ever stepped into a place and felt it resist you, not with anger, but with memory, you know the kind of story this became. I wasn't the only one who noticed the shift. A few weeks after I left the toy and the clock, undisturbed, another archivist returned from a deep file audit. She'd been reviewing unsorted transcripts from a 1950 Fayetteville Town Council meeting, one where the Sodder case was never mentioned, but where a strange ordinance was passed. No dwellings may be rebuilt atop burned foundations without a witness's record of final silence. She asked me if I understood what that meant. I told her, no one hears the same silence twice. In 1946, a group of volunteer firefighters was recorded, clearing the debris of the Sodder home for the second time. Not to rescue, but to catalog. One of them, never named, wrote in the margin of his personal journal. The clock was face down, but it rang once while I turned it. That entry was never published, but the journal still exists. File number 029, box labeled Disputed Incidents, Non-Verified. And beneath that, a phrase I hadn't seen until I returned to that file just days ago. One toy, one toll. It was written in pencil, faded, same handwriting as the crayon drawing. This is the part I still think about. Not the bell, not the ledger, just how quiet it got. There's a ritual from the old Appalachian Mountains, documented just once in 1931, by a folklorist named M. Dunlin. If a child disappears in fire and the time of their passing is not confirmed, a tolling must be held in private. An hour kept in stillness with their final toy. They called it the wake-keeping bell. Not a real bell, but a moment. A single minute that returns again and again, until someone finally keeps it properly. That minute, for the Soders, was 1:27. That minute is the one the clock never let go of. That minute is the one the toy was stuffed with. And that minute is the one I now keep. Each time I see the soot shift on the clock face, when no one else is in the room, when people ask what really happened that night, the fire, the children, the search, I give them the records. But what I never give is the box. Not anymore, because I've come to believe something simple. Not definitive, not factual, just quietly possible. That grief can take form, and sometimes that form takes its time. If you've ever heard a story and felt like it was watching you as much as you were listening, then you understand why I stopped looking for answers. The soot doesn't always fall evenly. The silence doesn't always stay silent. And some clocks refuse to wind down. The melted glass is gone now. The hands are almost fully darkened, but I swear, when I pass by the archive room late at night, I still hear the tiniest sound. Not ticking, not movement, just weight, as if time had been folded and now presses back. I don't know if I've remembered this right, but the light never came back after that final shift. Not the lamplight, not the one above the door, only the clock glow. Software soiled, diamond soys flickering in silence, and across the floor, the faintest trail of soot, in the shape of a single child's shoe. They said it happened once before, but no one remembers who she was. The melted clock is still here, but it no longer tells time. It listens now. If you've ever watched something fade, not vanish but fade, you know what this kind of silence feels like. It doesn't arrive suddenly. It bleeds in through the corners. It brushes across your shoulder. Just when you think the room is emptied, the box is closed. The toy is folded into cloth. The glass from the clock is long gone, but I kept the shard that fell near my foot. It's no longer sharp. The edges have dulled, as if memory softened them. Slowly, gently, like a mother smoothing her child's hair. One final time. I keep it in a drawer I rarely open, wrapped in blue paper, the same shade as the pajamas from that record, the ones Morris wore. And sometimes, late at night, I take it out again, not to study, not to explain, just to sit with it, just to listen. It makes no sound. But the room changes when it's near. The lamplight flickers less. The clock across the wall runs slower. Even the shadows pause. I've tried to convince myself it's nothing. Just a coincidence, an old archivist's fatigue. But one night, as I held the shard in my palm and looked into its cloudy reflection, I saw something. Not a face, not a figure, just a shape. Faint. 5 smaller shadows lined up beside what looked like a broken frame. And in that moment, the light bulb above me hummed once, then went out. No wind, no storm, just stillness. And when I looked down again, the shard had shifted in my hand. It was warmer than it should have been. She used to walk with purpose. But tonight, she drifts, and maybe so should you. I placed the shard back in its wrapper, returned it to the drawer. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I wound the melted clock. Just once, even though I knew it wouldn't tick, and I whispered aloud, "If you kept the minute, I'll keep the memory." There's a quiet story in the Appalachians, not written, just passed. Old women used to say, if a name is whispered at the right time of night, the hour will fold itself around it and keep it safe. I don't know if that's true, but I whisper their names anyway, just before I sleep. Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jenny, Betty. The fire took 5 minutes, but not everything it touched burned. And even now, the clock waits in that same stillness. No ticks, no hands, just a hollow face that never cracked, and a drawer that no longer needs to be opened. There's nothing else to do tonight but drift, just a little slower than before. You're safe now. Sleep well. I'll be here. When the lights go low again. Maybe you've heard it too, just before sleep. The soft breath of something that still remembers.